y'all, it's Sarah and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Somebody's excited. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for clicking on this video. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing by clicking the button down below. So today's video is going to be my recommendations for beginners into fantasy, my intro to fantasy. I have been requested to do this a few times. I did a reel on this probably 3 years ago and it was one of my most popular reels. We're going to go through them really quickly and we'll see what you guys think. So these are my recommendations for beginners to fantasy if you are looking for an intro, a gateway to this great genre. So first off is one that also now has an adaptation, and this is Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson is a middle grade fantasy based on Greek mythology. It centers some really awesome friendships, adventure. The mythology is spot on. These books are really, really fun. Again, they are middle grade, but based on what I can tell from my friends all over the bookish internet is that Percy Jackson holds up into adulthood. There are so many people that are watching the adaptations now either with their kids or with their spouses or just by themselves who are adults who are obsessed with this series, both reading and watching. So I think if you are at all interested in Greek mythology, a little bit of an adventure, want just like a light-hearted, fun, good time, this is an excellent, excellent series. So next one is going to be another middle grade recommendation, and this is Nevermore. I just talked about this in another video of mine, but Nevermore is a magical middle grade about a cursed child, and she ends up in a place called Nevermore where there is tons of wild magic, and it is just so fun. They're a little chunky, but there's a lot of like fun quirks, fun world building, really funny characters, really cool characters. The main character is one you want to root for, and I think it's got a lot of interesting like pieces of magic that aren't really difficult to understand. So you're not going to have to try and follow this giant world building encyclopedia, if you will, but you're still going to see those fun quirks that you might see in middle grade. So let's head into YA. So my first YA beginner to fantasy recommendation is the book Fable. It is a duology, but it also now has a prequel and like a spin-off story as well. So I think there's 4 books, maybe a 5th is coming, but you could just read the like insular duology of Fable and Namesake. There isn't really a magical system in this book, which I think is nice for a lot of people who are trying to just get into the genre. The only magical piece really is like the ability to like hear gemstones. So it's about a girl who is a diver and she dives in coral reefs for gemstones, and the gemstones hold, you know, some sort of significance in society in terms of like makers guilds. And it's very well written. It's Adrienne Young and she's fantastic. But there's no big magical world building. So it really is just set in a different world, and there is, you know, one little piece to the magic that you really dig into, and that's it. So I think if you're wanting sort of a lush setting, you know, an adventure on the seas, that sort of thing without a lot of magic, this one is going to be excellent. Next in YA is Sorcery of Thorns. This one came out a few years ago and was immediately really popular. It is about a teen girl who works in a magical library, and she works with grimoires, which are basically like evil books that they have to keep like restrained, if you will. And she works in this magical library, and there's a lot of like traveling across the map to different libraries, and things go missing, and people are like stuff happens with people, and who kind of like a magical mystery, if you will. This one, so many people in my book club loved. It's not it's not my favorite, but I think it's a really good intro into the genre. The magic is cool. I love the demon character. The demon is spot on. There is a novella that comes after this. It's just like a fun, good time. And it's one that you can read on audio and not be really lost. At least it was for me. And I think it's kind of wholesome, right? It almost reads a little upper middle grade. And for me, that's really good as an intro. Aside of all of that, something I loved is that this main character is a tall girl. And as a fellow tall girl, I appreciate that. She is not tiny, tiny, tiny. It is like, I'm tall, I'm strong. And I love that. My next YA fantasy recommendation is Shadow and Bone. This book definitely does have a big chunk of world building to it, but I think it reads really easily. There are references in the front if you forget like what does each type of magic do, and I just think it reads really simply. It reads very much YA, sometimes in a good way, some people think not in the best way, but I think it's a really fun world to be in, and while it does have a lot of world building, that world building isn't necessarily complicated, and it also has an adaptation to go with it, so it's sort of one that you can like read and then watch and kind of go along with it and learn more about the world that way. So I think Shadow and Bone is really good for beginners if you're looking to delve a little bit more into a bigger magical system. Next YA is going to be The Nature of Witches. This book didn't resonate with me as much as, say, Shadow and Bone, but I think for people that, again, are looking to get into fantasy, this book is excellent. It's got a lot of fans out there. This author has a lot of fans out there, and this book might have the prettiest cover of all the covers ever. So if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. The Nature of Witches centers on witches who can control the climate, and they affect like different seasons, and it focuses on one girl who is able to control all of them. There's some really interesting like relationship type stuff in the book, and sort of like self-discovery and all that sort of stuff. So if you're interested in that aspect of maybe romance or lit fic or family fiction, hi. Sorry, my dog is like scratching his face off. If you're interested in that sort of stuff, but you also want a dash of fantasy, I think you're really going to like this book. It has a lot of heart to it. Right, next recommendation, this is a fan favorite for a lot of y'all. I know this is more sci-fi, if you will, just based on the nature of like robots and things like that. But for me, it's also fantasy just based on the inclusion of like mythology and folktales and all that sort of stuff. And this is Cinder. But each of the stories follows a different character who is based on mythology. It is set where there are robots and spaceships and all that sort of stuff. But it does stay rooted in that like folklore, if you will, and fairy tales, which I think is really cool. I've read the first 3 in the series and I listened to them all on audio and I understood what was happening, so that's always good for fantasy on audio. And these books just have a lot going for them. They have really interesting characters. Most people really like the characters. There's not anyone that's like, oh, I don't like this main character, or I don't want to read about this character. People really love them, and there's adventures, there's heists, there's drama, there's all sorts of stuff going on in these books. And I think if you are interested in sort of like the, not necessarily like Disney, but if you're interested in the fairy tale end of fantasy and mythology, I think you'll really like Cinder. Next on the list is The Wicked Deep by Shea Ernshaw. I think Shea is one of the best authors out there. She does an excellent job. The Wicked Deep is based on a town in the Pacific Northwest where every year there's a festival for people to come out these boys into the ocean and drown them. So it's a little like Salem-esque, a little like witchcraft trials, and it's very interesting. It's very twisty, and I think it's got enough sort of like folklore and tall tales to be fantasy, but it's very still rooted in the real world. So if you're not ready to head into the entirety of fantasy, new world building, all that, I think this is a good start to sort of dip your toes into maybe a little witchy, a little paranormal without being full fantasy. So the next one on my list, my last one, is an adult fantasy. It is high fantasy, but it is very low stakes as per the author. This is Legends and Lattes. And again, it's an adult fantasy. It's very cozy. It is basically like an orc who doesn't want to fight anymore, and she decides to open a coffee shop in a town that has never heard of coffee. It's very cute. It's very cozy. There is some like relationship stuff. It's one of those books where like you know it's going to be fine because it's so low stakes, but it still keeps you wanting to read because you want to just sit in your chair with a blanket and hot chocolate and read it. So it's introducing you to some of these mythical creatures, if you will, but in a setting that is super easy to digest. Alright, y'all, so those are my recommendations for an introduction to fantasy. If you are new or a beginner to fantasy books, these are where I would start. I've got middle grade, I've got YA, and I've got adult. So I'm going to link these books down below. They will be affiliate linked. If you want to check out any of them down below, I think they are all excellent recommendations. And please let me know, is there anything that I missed on this list or any on this list that you absolutely love? Please comment down below. Again, check out any of the links in the description for anything that applies to you. If you are still here and haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe link down below. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.